What if I told you that buried in the sands of ancient Egypt lies a secret so powerful that it could revolutionize how you understand reality itself? What if the greatest minds in history, from Renaissance scholars to modern physicists, have been quietly studying teachings that most people have never even heard of? You're about to discover Hermeticism, the ancient wisdom tradition that has been hidden in plain sight for over 2,000 years. This isn't some New Age fantasy or internet conspiracy theory. This is documented history that connects the dots between ancient Egyptian mysteries, Greek philosophy, and the foundations of Western thought. But here's what's truly mind-blowing. While millions search for meaning in modern, self-help books and trending philosophies, they're completely unaware that the answers they seek were already written down by ancient sages who achieved states of consciousness that most people can barely imagine. The legendary figure known as Hermes Trismegistus left behind teachings so profound that they influenced everyone from medieval alchemists to Renaissance masters. Like Marsilio Ficino. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn will fundamentally shift how you see the connection between your inner world and the universe around you. The rabbit hole goes deeper than you think, and once you understand these principles, you'll never look at reality the same way again. Here's what the mainstream narrative won't tell you. For centuries, scholars and institutions have been systematically downplaying one of the most sophisticated spiritual traditions in human history. They've reduced Hermeticism to footnotes in philosophy textbooks or dismissed it as primitive superstition. But the evidence tells a completely different story. When Renaissance humanist Marsilio Ficino got his hands on the Corpus Hermeticum in the 15th century, he was so stunned by its contents that he immediately stopped translating Plato's works. Plato, the foundation of Western philosophy, to focus on these Hermetic texts instead. Think about that for a moment. One of history's greatest scholars encountered teachings so revolutionary that he abandoned the most important philosophical project of his time. The deception runs even deeper. For generations, people have been told that ancient civilizations were primitive compared to our modern understanding. Yet Hermetic texts describe concepts that sound remarkably similar to quantum physics, consciousness research, and holistic thinking that we're only now beginning to rediscover. The ancient Hermeticists understood that the physical world and mental realm are intimately connected, as above, so below. Thousands of years before modern science began exploring the observer effect in quantum mechanics, they developed sophisticated practices for achieving altered states of consciousness that allowed direct access to universal truths. While today's seekers often struggle with meditation apps and weekend workshops, this isn't just historical curiosity. This is about recognizing that ancient wisdom traditions possess knowledge that could transform how we understand consciousness, reality, and human potential. Let's address the elephant in the room. Most people approaching spirituality today are doing it backwards. They're seeking external validation, collecting crystals, following gurus, and chasing experiences instead of understanding the fundamental principles that actually create transformation. Hermeticism reveals why this approach fails so spectacularly. According to Hermetic teachings, the problem isn't that you need more techniques or better teachers. The problem is that you're looking outside yourself for something that can only be found within. The ancient texts describe Gnosis, a direct knowing that comes not through intellectual study, but through inner revelation. Modern seekers often get trapped in what Hermeticists would recognize as the realm of appearances, mistaking the shadows on the cave wall for reality itself. They accumulate spiritual concepts like trophies while remaining fundamentally unchanged. They read about enlightenment, talk about consciousness, and attend retreats. But they miss the core insight that transformation happens through direct experience, not intellectual understanding. The Hermetic tradition was never about believing in doctrines or following prescribed practices. It was about developing Nous, a faculty of direct perception that allows you to see through the illusions. They keep most people trapped in cycles of seeking without finding. The ancient practitioners understood that you don't need to escape the world to find truth. You need to recognize the divine nature of consciousness that's already present. This is why Hermeticism emphasizes that the individual is fundamentally no different from the supreme. Not as a belief system, but as a direct realization that changes everything about how you experience life. Now, we get to the revolutionary core of Hermetic wisdom. The texts describe a cosmology so sophisticated that it makes most modern spiritual teachings look simplistic by comparison. Picture this. Beyond our physical reality of planets and stars, there exist three additional spheres of reality: the Ogdoad, the Ennead, and the One. The Ogdoad is where souls exist before descending into physical bodies. Every person carries the memory of this realm, though most remain completely unconscious of it. The Ennead represents the realm of Nous, not intellectual mind, but divine intelligence that encompasses everything simultaneously. And beyond even this lies the One, the source from which all existence flows. Here's where it gets truly profound. Hermetic practitioners developed specific methods for consciously ascending through these realms while still alive. The texts describe detailed practices involving sacred sounds, visualizations, and altered states of consciousness that allowed initiates to directly experience these higher dimensions of reality. But the most revolutionary insight is this. According to Hermeticism, human beings are the only creatures capable of bridging all these realms simultaneously. You exist in the physical world, carry the light of Nous within your consciousness, and have the potential for direct union with the One. This isn't metaphor. It's presented as literal fact about the nature of human consciousness. The practical implications are staggering. If these teachings are accurate, it means you have access to levels of awareness and capability that most people never even suspect exist. The ancient Hermeticists weren't just philosophers. They were consciousness researchers mapping the furthest reaches of human potential. The suppression of Hermetic wisdom wasn't accidental. It was systematic and deliberate. When classical scholar Isaac Casaubon demonstrated in the early 17th century that Hermetic texts were written during the earliest Christian period rather than ancient Egypt, it wasn't just academic correction. It was the beginning of a campaign to discredit these teachings entirely. The timing wasn't coincidental. As the scientific revolution gained momentum and institutional Christianity consolidated power, both had reasons to eliminate traditions that emphasized direct spiritual experience over external authority. Hermeticism taught that individuals could achieve divine knowledge through their own inner work, a concept that threatened both religious hierarchies and the emerging materialist worldview. The result was that some of the most sophisticated consciousness technologies in human history were driven underground. Secret societies like the Rosicrucians, Freemasons, and the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn preserved fragments of these teachings. But the coherent tradition was largely lost to mainstream culture. Even more revealing is how modern scholarship has handled Hermetic texts. For decades, academics dismissed the mystical experiences described in these works as literary fictions, rather than taking seriously the possibility that they represented actual consciousness practices. Only recently have researchers like Wouter Hanegraaff begun arguing that these texts should be understood as instruction manuals for achieving altered states of awareness. This suppression continues today in more subtle forms. While ancient wisdom traditions are often romanticized or commercialized, the actual techniques and principles of Hermeticism remain largely unknown to people who could benefit most from understanding them. The path into genuine Hermetic practice begins with understanding what the tradition actually teaches about spiritual development. Unlike modern approaches that focus on comfort and feel-good experiences, Hermeticism describes a rigorous process of inner transformation that requires confronting the shadow aspects of consciousness. The texts identify 12 tormentors of darkness that inhabit human consciousness: ignorance, sorrow, intemperance, lust, injustice, greed, deceit, envy, treachery, anger, recklessness, and malice. These aren't just psychological concepts. They're described as actual entities that possess the soul and must be systematically expelled through inner work. The process involves developing three essential faculties: logos, capacity for sacred speech and genuine dialogue; Gnosis, direct spiritual knowledge; and Nous, divine intelligence. This isn't achieved through reading books or attending workshops, but through dedicated practice that includes meditation, contemplation of cosmic principles, and what the texts call theurgical work, creating conditions that invite divine intervention. One of the most powerful practices involves the use of sacred vowel sounds corresponding to planetary spheres. Ancient practitioners would chant specific sequences while visualizing ascent through cosmic levels, inducing profound alterations in consciousness that allowed direct experience of higher dimensional realities. But perhaps most importantly, Hermeticism emphasizes that this work must be grounded in piety, not religious dogma, but genuine reverence for the sacred nature of existence. The tradition teaches that the gods can forgive everything except irreverence, and that authentic spiritual development is impossible without cultivating what the Greeks called eusebia, sacred awe for the divine. You now have access to knowledge that most people will never encounter, despite it being freely available in translated texts. The question is, what are you going to do with this information? The Hermetic tradition offers something that modern spirituality often lacks: a complete system for understanding consciousness and reality that's been tested by practitioners across centuries. But it also demands something that many people aren't prepared to give: the commitment to actual transformation rather than just intellectual curiosity. If this resonates with you, start with Brian Copenhaver's translation of the Hermetica, which includes the core Corpus Hermeticum, and provides scholarly context without losing the spiritual dimension. Clement Salamon's The Way of Hermes offers another accessible entry point that preserves the inspirational quality of these teachings. But remember what the texts themselves emphasize. Reading about these concepts is just the beginning. The real work happens in the silence of contemplation, in developing the capacity to see beyond appearances, and in cultivating the kind of reverence that opens consciousness to direct spiritual experience. The ancient Hermeticists achieved states of awareness that allowed them to perceive the fundamental unity underlying apparent diversity. They developed practical methods for transcending ordinary consciousness and accessing what they called the supreme good. These aren't historical curiosities. They're documented techniques that work for people willing to engage seriously with the tradition. Your inner light is identical to the universal light of Nous, but most people remain blind to this reality their entire lives. The Hermetic path offers a way to remember what you've always been, but have forgotten. The question is whether you're ready to move beyond seeking and start actually finding. If this video opened your eyes to possibilities you hadn't considered before, hit that like button and subscribe for more content about hidden wisdom traditions that could transform how you understand reality. The rabbit hole of ancient knowledge goes much deeper than what we've covered today, and there's so much more to explore together.